Hey folks, and we want to welcome you. I'm Mike Brown from Hometown Novel Writers Association, and we're here at the Coweta Force Building on Salbide Avenue here in downtown Newnan. And boy, is this a special place. If I get a chance while we're broadcasting tonight, we will try to show you a little bit of the scenery here, but you can get a fair view of this beautiful upfront venue for us to be able to hold this event. We're very thankful to Hal Arnold and his wife and the whole staff now here at the Coweta Force program, and we're glad to be a guest here. Tonight we are talking about writing beyond books. It's a great program tonight because, you know, sometimes we get to thinking about writing is only about writing books. You know, children's books, adult books, mystery, suspense, memoirs, biographies, historical accounts. But actually, there's a whole other side of writing that goes into column writing, writing articles. There's business writing that is all involved in that. And I would imagine that there's stuff that Coweta Force needs from time to time. You need to have writers who can communicate the needs and the outreach for what they do here. And we've got three guests here tonight, and I'm going to get out of the way so you can see all three. Scott is definitely a little smaller than I am. So we have Scott Ludwig, we have Toby Nix, and we have Damon Poirier. And Damon gets the award for coming the furthest because he comes from Marietta. I was just up here neck of the woods this past weekend with a book launch for George Weinstein and Jim Conrad. And at the Red Hair.
On the square there.
Yeah, okay. All right. So it was a fantastic opportunity to be in Marietta. Scott is from Sonoy, for those that don't know Scott. And Toby is from, you live in Franklin.
I live in Franklin now, yes.
He lives in Franklin now. And I got to talk to him later because I found out in my ancestry I have some Nixes on my grandmother's side of the family. So could be. And they said something about Franklin. So we could be cousins and we don't even know it. So before we get started tonight, what I wanted to do is just to give you a little bit of the calendar of what's going on with Hometown Novel Writers Association. We're at the end of our calendar year, and these are the events that we got currently going on. And I'm going to go over here and grab a cheat sheet because at my age I can't remember everything. So y'all excuse me one second. Come on. No, you're fine. All right. So after tonight, what we have for author program, we got one more significant author event, and that will be at the Newnan Carnegie Library on November 17th. That's the third Thursday. And it begins again like this did at 6:30 in the evening. And it's upstairs in the Carnegie Library. So we get to fill that auditorium up there for our last event. And during that event, we're going to be introducing books that have been published in 2022 that'll be displayed. Because you'd be surprised to see how many books have been published in 2022 by the Hometown Novel Writers Association authors. We want to give them all a shout out and have them the ability to display their books. Because most of them, or a lot of them, are already on display at Corner Arts Gallery at the local Georgia Author Book Nook that's inside the store. So that's November 17th at 6:30 to roughly about 8:30. We'll be there, and we'll be featuring Angie Gallion, Richard Proctor, Jacqueline Lee, and Armistead. Scott will be our moderator. I get to step behind the camera instead of in front of it. He does a much better job than I do. We just to let you know, we've postponed our last workshop for the year for the writers, and we'll be getting that rescheduled right after the first of the year. I've already talked to Susan Crawford, and we're working on that right now. Other events that we have going on is on December 8th. Come on in. Come on in. Hey, I haven't seen you all day yet. On December 8th, the Hometown Novel Writers Association authors and writers and all will have an opportunity to have a Christmas party. And we're going back to where this all began. Hometown Novel Nights began at Rogers Barbecue in Hogansville, Georgia, 4 years ago. We've been friends that long? Wow. Scott's one of the originals. But we get to do that. There'll be some information coming for everybody. And y'all are invited to come, by the way, and there'll be some information on our Facebook page and then our mailing list going out. So make sure you signed up on the email list so that you're on that. Also, the end of this month, October 29th, we're meeting at the Old Town Sharpsburg Library in downtown, if there is such a thing, downtown Sharpsburg. And we're having it's a board meeting, but it's also an organizational meeting to put together the 2023 calendar and get us off and launch it, because 2023 is right around the corner. Every time I turn around, I look at my desk calendars and I realize I just sent my wife out to get a brand new 2023 desk calendar because it's creeping up very, very quickly. Saturday, by the way, there's going to be a bunch of the authors that will be outside of Corner Arts Gallery. And there's the Spirits and Spice Downtown Festival going on from 2 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And we've got a couple of authors who have got brand new books out that will be featured there. Richard Proctor has his book. If any of y'all are familiar with Coach Max Bass, who was at Newnan High School for years on years, this is referred to decades on decades. Richard was able to work with his widow, and he just put out the authorized biography of Coach Max Bass. And it's Everybody Needs a Mule, I believe is the proper title for the book. So, y'all come by Corner Arts Gallery, and then he'll also be there at November 17th at the Hometown Novel Writers Program there at the Newnan Carnegie Library. And I believe I've got everything that I need to say at the moment. If you are a writer and you are interested in getting involved in some of our writer programs, we have a monthly critique online program that we do every second Monday on each month. But we also started this fall, every Monday night at 6:30, we meet in person at the Corner Arts Gallery studios. We get the back of the store. The store's closed, and there's nothing but writers, crazy writers in the back room, talking about writing, talking about getting published, complaining to one another and helping one another to move forward in their publishing careers. If you're interested in knowing more about that, feel free to get in touch with us, send us a message to the Hometown Novel Writers, or send it through my webpage at TM Brown Author on the Facebook page or online. So with that in mind, I would again like to reintroduce you to, now that we got everybody basically here, I think it's going to be here, Scott Ludwig from Sonoy, Toby Nix from officially Franklin, Georgia now. But we're all, we're a happy family. Damon Poirier, who I've gotten to know a long, long time. And finally, we're getting to get you here, down here in God's country, where Louis Gazard and Erskine Caldwell's ghost still floats around. We're glad to have you. They're all writers in their own acclaim. So tonight, what I'd like to start out with, me playing Scott's part tonight, is ask a simple question for you, each of you, to introduce yourselves. Just talk about, who you are, what you're currently doing. Don't have to get all the, beyond much more than that, but introduce yourselves as if you would want to shake somebody's hand. Scott?
You want to start with Damon? He can
go ahead.
Age first, and then we go to beauty.
What? My name is Scott Ludwig. I write a weekly column for the Newnan paper for 6 years almost. When I first started writing, I wrote on Wednesday. Then I got moved to Friday. Then they didn't have the Friday paper. Then I got moved to Saturday. Then they don't have the Saturday paper. So now I got moved back to Wednesday. And I used to be on page 4, but now that Toby's taken my spot on page 4, sometimes I'm on page 5, 28.
20 pages newspaper.
But in the fall now, I write recaps of the college football action for the weekend. But outside of the fall, for about 17 weeks, I'm locked up doing college football. Not locked up is the wrong word, because that's what I really love doing. But the other 35 weeks, I get to write about anything I want. So those are the fun things. So I write about things that happen, mostly funny, sometimes sad. I do a lot of features on people, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And once in a blue moon, I go off and rant. That's very rare. For about a year plus now, I write a column for the Albany Herald, and those are, I take a lot of liberties here because nobody knows me in Albany. I also don't go down there much. So, and I live in Sonoy, and I've been married to Cindy, who came tonight, and the third row there. And our older son, we have 2 sons. Our older son is getting married Saturday. And we're having a welcome to the wedding ceremony or dinner get together tomorrow night here, right? Our younger son, sadly, we lost 2.5 years ago. And it's kind of neat that Hank put us speaking in front of Josh's room. That's a picture of our son, because my wife and I sponsor this room. So, welcome. Thanks for turning in.
Good introduction. What do you got, Toby?
All right. My name is Toby Nix. I am employed with the Coweta County Sheriff's Office since November. I'm their public information officer. I spent a couple years on patrol, a couple years as an investigator. I write for the Newnan Herald. I'm on page 4. I'm on page 4. I'm in the Heard County newspaper. We moved to Heard County. My wife's on the back row. My daughter's beside her. My son's things that 21-year-olds do. So I write for the Heard County newspaper, and I, like Scott, just write about whatever happens. And I'm really bad about deadlines. If it's due Friday at 10, Friday at 8 when I'm driving into work, I might have something pop in my head that I can write real quick. Those are good. Like, if you have something that you write about, it's usually not a good thing. But it's just whatever happens in my life is what makes it to the column. Sometimes to her chagrin, she doesn't want everybody knowing everything, but I tend to write about it. I guess that's about it. We've been in Heard County for 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years. I grew up in Union City. She was in College Park, and we keep moving further and further into the sticks. If Heard County ever grows up, we'll move to Alabama.
Damon.
Well, my name's Damon Poirier. I'm originally from Michigan. I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit. Moved down here my senior year of high school. I worked for the Marietta Daily Journal. I've been the reporter and historian there for the last 23 years. What's really neat, our paper, we have an archive that goes back 150 years. And so part of my job is helping reporters research things, pulling up background information. And I write a weekly column called Time Capsule, where I look back at things 100 years ago, 75, 50, 20. And there's a lot of neat stuff in Cobb County's history. And I brought a couple of clips that I'll talk about later, but there's some things that have happened that most folks don't know about and will blow your mind.
Very good, very good. Let me ask you the next level of questions. That was just to get you warmed up and get you talking a little bit. And so hopefully everybody's listening. And by the way, Damon, I happen to know that Mark is on watching you now and grading you. We'll send you a note later, I'm sure. All right. So tell us, I would like you to share with us what in your background got you into writing. You know, how did you get into writing? What was behind all that? So that if somebody's sitting out here or on the audience, virtually, and they're curious about writing, how did you get started? Now I won't say what qualifies because we all are qualified to write, but you know what led you into writing what you do? Go ahead, Scott.
I'll go first again.
I'll mix it up in later. You can set the pace.
Okay. How I got interested in writing is when I first moved to Atlanta in '79. I used to read Louis Broussard's column, and I think he wrote on Tuesdays and Fridays. Twice a week. It's on page 1. Yeah. But I said, God, that guy's so good. And so I've got all of his books. My mom, she stood in line when she was visiting one time for a signing for him. So I got a signed Broussard book for Christmas one year. It's kind of cool. So I started writing little small columns like that. And then I was a runner as well. And everybody that runs wants to write a book about running. Right, Jim? Yeah. See? So, and honestly, I think about what I want to write while I run. So 50% of my time is doing that. 50% of my time writing is spent remembering what I thought about when I was running and actually putting it down on paper. So, and my first book, Jim, that you should buy, is called Running Through My Mind. So it's kind of got two meanings. So who influenced me? Obviously Louis Broussard, people like Pat Conroy, because his writing is beautiful. Rick Riley, Rick Bragg, because they're just so darn clever. Dave Barry, because he's hilarious. Or Dave Barry, what else have we got? So at this point, I've written close to 24 books, 7 during the pandemic. So what did you do during the pandemic? Well, I wrote a lot, I ran a lot, but and I've managed to compile my columns from the newspaper into books. And I call it my Southern Exposure series. And I was originally going to put 100 columns in each book, and I miscounted on the first book. So the first book is called Southern Charm. It's got 101 of my first columns. In a second. And the second book, which had to match the first, so it's got 101 more columns, it's called Southern Comfort. And then my third one is called Southern Hospitality. That was one of the ones I just finished. And I'm starting my fourth one. It's called Southern Accent. And I'm 19 columns in. So you guys can do the math and figure out when that one will be ready. It'll be a while. I'm going to stop there.
There you go. That's fine. Now, I want to ask you a question because not everybody knows Scott this well. But I was noticing that you have this F on your shirt. Is that Fordham University?
It is not.
Go Gators.
Go Gators!
Go Gators, yes. I do know the real reason for that F, so.
And I've
But I
had
like
in my
that.
column many times that the only thing better than the Florida wins is Georgia loss. Sorry, Bulldog fans.
There you go. Yeah, it's hard for, being a Gator fan, raised Gator, and then writing Georgia Bulldog stuff in your story. And I do that to please the crowd, home crowd. But I do root for Florida during Florida-Georgia games, sorry. This year I may switch allegiances, I'm not sure, but we'll see. All right, Toby, please tell us a little bit about your background, because you've got a unique background that way, right?
Yeah, well, and to steal him again, Louis Broussard, I grew up loving him. I still love Louis Broussard, and I know the ending at this point, but I went to college for a little bit, not long enough to get any papers that meant anything, but I always liked reading, I always liked writing, and I turned in this essay that I thought was going to change this professor's life, and when I gave it to her, it was all black ink. When she gave it back to me, it was all red. I mean, she whipped into it something fierce. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm not that good of a writer. So I didn't write anything. Many years later, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I had a friend, and I'm on Facebook, and I just write silly stuff. I wouldn't be friends with me on Facebook. I'm just kind of obnoxious, I think. But she told me that when she would be at dinner parties, she would open up her Facebook and read my silly post to her friend at the dinner party. And she gave me a book from David Sedaris. And I read it. He was kind of like Louis Broussard, like that same I loved it. And so I was like, yeah, I'll try it. So I wrote up a couple of things, and I sent them to the Hurt County newspaper. And I was like, just wondered if you would be interested in printing this stuff, and they did. They took it, and that was enough for me. I saw my stuff in the newspaper, and a lady at work sent it to Clay Neely with the Newnan Times-Herald, and I never thought. I'm writing about cornbread and collards, and like the Newnan Times-Herald, it's a real newspaper. So I never bothered, but they took it, and that's been, I guess, about the same time as you. I've been writing about 6 years. I've been writing. I used to have one every week, and then I've run out of stuff to write about. So Clay and I now alternate. This is my week, so I'll have something in this weekend's paper. And then, I don't know where I was going with all that.
What page?
4. I know that now.
Now, David, again, you've got a really interesting background, I know, because I've already interviewed you before. So, David, talk a little bit about your background, because your career has been all about writing.
Yeah, well, the fiction side started when I was a kid. watching TV and enjoying different cartoons, and then going, I could come up with my own thing, put my friends in it. And so I started writing little things like that. And my dad, kept encouraging me. About 5th grade, we had a writing class, and my teacher sent home a note and said, give this to your father. Okay. My dad's a teacher at same school. I was like, okay. Brought it home to my dad, and he said, I'm not signing this. You tell her you write what you want. She had wrote on there, Damon's really creative, but we need him to start writing about something other than monsters. Because every little short story I wrote was something about a vampire, Frankenstein, or whatnot. And so Dad wouldn't let him stifle my creativity, and I've been writing about monsters ever since. Now, I was submitting things in high school and was getting rejection letter, and some of them were really harsh. You ever have somebody tell you you can't do something? It really sucks the wind out of you. When you get a bunch of them over time, it really starts, why am I bothering doing this? And Stephen King has a great story. He had a railroad spike in his wall, and every time he got a rejection letter, he would impale it on that spike. And he had hundreds of rejection letters for Carrie, his first book, on that spike, and one day the spike fell out of the wall. So he hammered a new spike in and kept going. I wish I knew this story. I stopped writing for about 6 years. And about that time I was, engaged to my wife, and I was looking for a job other than grocery stores. And she said, I saw something in the newspaper, they're looking for an editorial assistant. Why don't you apply? Great way to get your foot in and get started. So I did. 23 years later, I'm the newsroom administrator and historian. I write the column every week. I take press releases constantly throughout the day, put those around. So it's kind of become, it's a job, and then I started kind of writing myself back in fiction-wise, just for the love of it. And Mark Wallace McGuire, I don't know if any of you were here for the panel that he was on not too long ago. It was like a week ago.
He was in LaGrange with us, earlier this month,
So Mark and I, longtime friends. We worked together at the paper when he was a reporter. And when he started publishing his Alexandria Rising novels, I was like, wow, I wish I could do that. And he's like, what's stopping you? And he kind of kept poking at me. And if you know Mark, he doesn't let up. He'll get you and keep getting you. And he's like, your stuff's good. You should do something with it. Come on. So finally I caved and I said, all right, read these 3, tell me what you think. He read 3 short stories. He said, you got to put a book out. So I started doing more. In 2019, I published my first book. And it's all because of Mark.
So each of them has different backgrounds, in their writing careers. Because what did you do for a living, Scott, before you
I
retired?
worked at the JCPenney Catalog Center for 24 years in Forest Park till it closed. And I worked for Porsche Cars for 14.
Yeah. So that's not what you call the fertile ground for writing creative stories. Toby is a sheriff's department, which I'm sure that's a right field for stories. There's no 2 ways about that.
A lot of those for after I retire.
Yeah, you have to wait to get vetted later. But and here Damon has a career actually as a writer in that in a newspaper field. That's awesome. Before I go to the next question, is there anybody that has a question about what they've shared so far that you'd like to have clarified or added to? I love this crowd tonight. This is awesome. Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot because I'll start pointing at you. So, what do you want to say?
I can pick up.
You promised no questions.
Well, no, I said that you were going to ask the question. So think of a good one.
I'm trying.
See how nervous you can get them out here. Everybody think about that, because that's no fun. These guys are up here. They're paid a lot of money to stay up here and take this abuse. So they get more than I make. But no. So here's the next question that comes to my mind, because in the writers group recently, I was talking to it was at the book club I was doing some stuff with recently. Des will remember this, I'm pretty sure. I talk about, my wife and I, since we started writing novels, everywhere I go, there's stuff that you hear. and you go, I have got to put that in the book somehow. You know, I got to write this down. You know, guys, an old man talking about his bunion is going to wind up in a book somewhere, you know, kind of thing, you know, at a Cracker Barrel. So what I'm curious about, because you guys write articles, which is about life events and life things and things on your mind, where do you get your ideas? What gets your juices flowing so that the pen flows? And I'll start with Damon this time for you, Scott. How's that?
Well, I do that. I've warned several of my friends, anything you say can be used in a future book. It has happened where I've heard a snippet of conversation, and that one line sparked a whole brand new short story. It was just an amazing thing. Just walking out of Walmart, somebody walking past said it, wrote it down, turned it into a story. I like to tell people that you can find inspiration anywhere. There's an author, I can't remember who said it. I've tried finding this for about a year now. If anybody knows the guy, let me know later. But this author said, everybody walks past 50 points of inspiration in a day. It's a writer that notices 2 to 3 of them. And then you can turn that into something. So, you know, you can find things just about anywhere.
Yeah. Toby, what about you?
Yeah, it's life every day. I played in a golf tournament last Friday. I have not played golf in over 20 years. Somebody had to bring me clubs to use, but that was as I'm trying to play golf, very unsuccessfully. I'm like, okay, this is my story for the week, you know. So as things happen, when I was on patrol, there was a lot of stories because you get the adrenaline rushes on going to different calls. Those were a little bit harder. But anytime I write about work, I try to protect the identity of any victims or any injured people or anything like that. It's because you don't want a lot of what I write about when it's about work is tragedy or human suffering, and I don't want the person reading it to know that the guy's writing about me or whatever. So that gets kind of tricky. But if we were we went on a fishing trip with some buddies lately, and they knew the whole time down there, like, all right, he's gonna get a story out of that. Anytime I do anything, it's gonna be a story, and my friends expect it now. So I'll probably write about this within the next couple of weeks. I got terrible memory, so I'll have to do it quick. But
Now, do you write stuff down, you know, when you're...
no, I try to, but I'm always like, I don't have any paper and pen. I'm kind of a knucklehead.
You're still young enough to remember things.
Some of the time, yeah.
Scott and I had to write it down.
I should.
Scott, what about you?
Well, when I run, I spend a lot of time out running, so maybe 2 hours at a time. So my mind wanders all over the place. So when your mind does that, you're going to come up with ideas. Sometimes I'm inspired by just a phrase, like I was thinking of the phrase, and sometimes why. I remember the A-E-I-O-U, and sometimes why. And I said, what if why was a word? So I wrote my column this week for the Albany Herald called "And Sometimes Why." So if they posted it at 6 o'clock tonight. So if you on Albany Herald, and sometimes why, you'll read why it's not posted here. But I might put it down in Albany. But yeah, some of my wonders. And the last, ever since about 5 years ago. What's our next question? Is it going to be about what we're working on now? It is.
No, I've got
Not
something.
yet.
Not yet,
Can I save that then?
if you'd like to.
Okay. But the fact that people say, you might want to write a story about such and such, and then I talk to such and such, and they make just a wonderful story. Or a friend of ours, at the time she was working at an assisted living place, and she said, you should interview Eva Gerlitz. And I said, okay, I will. So Eva was 10 years old when World War II started. So she was in Nazi Germany, she lived in Berlin, and Hitler said all the kids had to get out of Berlin. So her mom and dad sent her off to cousins or aunt and uncles in, I think it was Austria. And after about a year, the family attorney called her and said, I just want you to know your parents are okay. And she said, no, they're not. So she finagled her way into some military German trains, took her back into Berlin. She got off the train. She didn't recognize the place. She found her house. It was rubble. And a neighbor found her crying on the curb. And she said that she was looking for her mom and dad. She said, well, I know where your mother is. She's in the hospital. And she said, which one? Because there was 3 in the area. And he knew which one. And she found her mother and slept under the bed for a few days. And she knew her father was in the hospital too, but she didn't know where. So she went to the next one that she knew about on foot, and half of the hospital was burned to the ground, and half of the hospital was still intact. Unfortunately, she found her dad on the intact side. So she survived World War II. She bullied the military into giving her parents and her some living quarters. And then the Russians came into town. They hid in the attic. Picture the Diary of Anne Frank, right? So she hid in the attic until finally, after more and more bombings, the American tanks came through and the war was over. She ended up marrying an American soldier, moved to California, lived there for 20 years. They lost their house in a wildfire, California wildfire. She moved to Peachtree City, where she lived. She lost her husband not too long ago. And she was in the process of writing her life story. Am I getting too long?
No, I just know you have your quick gin hit, I know.
Okay. Anyway, she was writing her life story, and she was telling me, because she knew I was going to write a column for the paper. And I did. And the column was called The Diary of Eva Berlitz. And she and I, we talked a lot. So we both like German beer. So we were in school of German beer when her article got published. And when you know it, the day before the article was published, she passed away.
Mm-hmm.
So the Portraits of the South, which I'll talk about a little later, I dedicated the book to her. And honestly, she tells the story. It's like she's telling you a movie. You can picture all these events. And if she ever got to write her memoir, and she did write it in a longhand legal tablet, one of those yellow legal tablets, but she wrote it in German. And I know her children have it. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I volunteered to turn it into a novel or whatever, but I think they want to keep it in the family, which is fine. But she was a very special lady. I think she was 91 years old when she passed. And right before she passed, she became really good friends. Her husband was friends with a guy that, guess what, flew bomber missions in World War II in Berlin. So he was actually bombing her, and they talked for the last 3 years of her life. They talked once a week. So that's a cool story.
Wow,
Anyway.
that is special. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I want to take this, and I'm going to start with Toby. Okay, so Toby, think about all of the articles and columns that you've written. What was the most hilarious event that sparked an article for you that you look back on with a smile every time you think about it?
That's tough. Okay, the first one that popped into my mind was several years back. I did Dragon for Dollars, the cancer treatment center where the guys dressed up in drag and went on to raise money for the cancer treatment center. And we were very ugly, like all the but it was a good night. Raised a lot of money for the cancer treatment center, and just on the fly, I'm sure that I would hope I've written funnier stuff than that. But that was a really fun night to see, like the guys up there, and I'm still friends with a lot of those guys to this day. But just off the top of my head, that's the first one I think was the Dragon for Dollars.
There you go. But so if you think about the story, it does kind of put a little smile on your
Oh
face.
yeah, it was a wild night. Yeah.
All right, very good. Damon, what about you? I mean, you've got a lot of stuff you've written. So what brings to your mind?
Well, it's not a smile, but I think it's probably my best article ever. I actually made a printout. It's a story. It's a cold case. Back in the 70s, there was a 9-year-old girl named Debbie Lynn Randall, and she went to the laundromat. Her stepfather dropped her off. She put the laundry in. She bought a box of laundry detergent, put the soap in, then walked back to her house. No one ever saw her. She was gone for a couple of weeks. Then they found her body. She was murdered. And the case to this day is still unsolved. And about 5 years ago, Coweta Cold Case Unit called us wanting information out of the archives, and so the call got directed to me because I'm a historian, so I pulled everything and gave it to them. And they said, would you guys want to do a story? And I said, okay. So talked with Ken Nix, who was the investigator there, and put everything together. Had a 3-page piece, timeline on it. And it's one of those things. I have a little girl, and she's about the same age when we were doing the story as Debbie, and it really hit me because my Sarah is my world. I mean, I love her dearly. She's the best thing I've ever had in my life. My wife and I, we don't know what we do without her. You know, she's all gifted student. She's just gotten her black belt in Taekwondo. She plays the saxophone. She paints. I mean, she's just an amazing little child. If something were to happen to her like this, I don't think I could survive. And I don't know how Debbie's mother has survived all these years. And so this is one of those articles that it just sticks with you. I mean, even after all this time, I still think about it. And one of the cool things about this is, you know, DNA evidence degrades after so long. I mean, even now, if somebody committed a murder today, 6 months from now, the DNA could not be there to pull a profile. Marietta Police did such a good job over 40 years ago that when we were writing this article, they had pulled a DNA profile off the evidence, put it in the CODIS, and at any point in the future, if somebody else was able to pull a profile from this guy, then we'll know, and we'll get answers for Debbie's mother.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, Scott, and I will give you the choice, either your favorite or your funniest, which one, ever one you choose to be, or maybe they're one and the same, I don't know.
Over the last 6 years, I think I've written about every event memorable, good, bad, and different, mostly funny, and probably more about Cindy than me, maybe. But I think, and then I thought, well, if I'm writing about everything, there was one little story, it didn't really need a whole column for a story, but it was just a small event. So I dedicated my last book to him. It was my 10th grade, I think it was sociology, I forget, William Muldrow. Bill Muldrow was my 10th grade teacher. And what happened that day, we came to class and he had the projector in the back, which was, oh God, another 45-minute boring black and white film, right? So he started, turned the lights out, it started rolling, and the cable from the projector to the wall was laying right in front of my foot. So I just kind of slid like that and popped it out of the wall. And he stood up in front of the class, Mr. Mulder, and he said, everybody be calm, the power's out. So we all sat there. I think we sat there for a good 30 minutes, and then Mr. Governor next door was walking down the hall. And he opened the door and he flicked on the light and said, what are y'all doing sitting in the dark? So I gave my book to him because I figured I owed him that.
So very good, very good. All right, again, anybody want to ask a question of these three about anything that they've written, about what inspired them, what, funniest, saddest point?
I have a question for Damon.
Yes.
When you write about something that is so tragic like that, does it hinder creativity to do that? Do you mix that? How do you take the professionalism of doing that and something that's so tragic? How do you pull the creativity out to do that? That's just
my editor at the time, he said, gather your facts, put everything together, and break it out so we have what happened before she disappeared, what happened, all the facts about her disappearing, and then finding her. Write it that way, and then what I want you to do at the very beginning is get creative with it. And here, I'll read you what I wrote on the beginning, because you can get a little creative sometimes. So what I did is, on a frigid winter's night in early 1972, 9-year-old Debbie Lynn Randall stepped out of a neighborhood laundromat heading for home, only half a block away. She never made it to her destination. Walking by herself, the Marietta youth disappeared. A spilled box of laundry detergent across the street from her home, the only evidence of her presence. Over the next few weeks, the people of Cobb County put aside their shock and fear to launch an exhaustive search for the, for the little girl. Debbie's body was found 16 days after she went missing, but 44 years later, the mystery as to what happened on her way home remains unsolved. And I do that with a lot of, not my regular time capsule columns because I just don't have the space, but with special ones on certain anniversaries, certain events, I'll try and kind of paint a picture at the beginning and then go into all the facts.
Anybody else have a question? All right, what my question here, or my lead in this way is this. We're here tonight because we're talking about writing beyond books, but we don't want to ignore books either. And so the question is tell us the difference in the challenges of writing your columns versus the writing of your books. And Toby, I think you do have a book out.
I've got two, yeah.
You got two now, yeah. I remember us doing this, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Just pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Toby's the only person I know that had an entire cheer squad show up at the Carnegie for it. They were up there doing cheers that night. That was cool. And we'll start with you, Toby. Please share a little bit about the differences for you and where your comfort level is in writing columns versus the writing and putting your books together.
Well, so of the two books, one of them is all columns, like Scott had used a compilation of columns. The second one is mostly columns, but I had some stories up front, and I can't write creativity. I can't say the word. So I just write what I think and feel and what happened. And so the difference for me on a column is I try to keep it under 500 words. And then, as I wrote the book, it was more in like the style of David Sedaris, or it's just like longer stories of what happened. And for what you just asked, it's kind of the same thing. But I found that I think I write better when I'm sad. Like if I'm happy and everything's good in my life, I can't be creative. And that's kind of sad, maybe. But if if something bad happens, or if you're in a sad mood or down, then it's like, man, that's pretty good, how I see it. But yeah, the writing style is the same. I'm just writing about what I felt when something happened or when I did something, but it's just I can go past 500 words.
Do you find your writing, whether it's writing columns or starting now writing some books, because I think you got a lot of material to work with. Do you find that, especially because of your job, okay, do you find writing to be cathartic? It gives you an opportunity to kind of let your emotions get out?
I don't know. Probably. I think what I really like about it is when I write about work and to other people in the profession, like, in law enforcement, a lot of times you don't ever want to admit that you were scared, or I work accidents where I get out in direct traffic, I get back in my car and cry for a second, get out, and you do all this stuff that dudes don't talk about. You know what I'm saying? So when you write something like that, and then the guy's like, man, that really hit, or that kind of stuff. So maybe it's that I'm saying stuff that the other guys are feeling, or something like that. Maybe it's just, I went over there. I was scared, but I went. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can say
You're not afraid to put your emotions down in writing. No, and I think that's awesome, because that helps other people.
Yeah, that's the cool part about it, is when it hits home for somebody else, something I wrote and felt. Because a lot of times you feel something or you think something, you're just assuming you're the only guy thinking that or whatever. You put it out there for people, and it hits for them. I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. I'm not as
Excellent.
dumb as I think I am. So.
Well, I'll finish with you by asking you this question, because it's a question I ask a lot of writers all the time anyway. Because to me, it's the most important question about writing, is why do you write? How would you sum it up?
Why do I write? I think that I like when I get the email from somebody, or somebody come up to me and say, I felt that one. 2020 for me, I don't know what all the questions will go tonight or where they're going to go, but 2020, my dad died in January, my mom died in March, my brother died in August, my friend died. Like, it was just this crazy year, and to put all that out there, and everybody, if the circle of life goes as it should, everybody's gonna feel the loss of their parents, and for everyone who had felt that already, to have them say, man, that was good or whatever. That's cool that you can write something that other people
making the connection, that's
Yeah,
important to you. Good, good. I think that's an excellent why,
Yeah.
because it motivates you. You get that inspiration moment when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, Toby, read your article,"
Yeah.
and it touched my heart and inspired me to think about those things. Excellent. So Damon, I'm going to go to you on the same basic questions, though, writing of the columns versus the books. How do you look at both of them, and how have you treated that? And then I will ask you the same question about why.
Well, the columns and things I write for the paper, I like doing the columns because it's shining a light on the past and things that people don't know about or the younger generations have forgotten about. And I think it's important that people know about it. And like I said earlier, I've got a few things that, I'll quiz you guys a little bit on just to see, kind of blow your mind on some stuff. With my fiction writing, I like doing it because I constantly have ideas. And if I don't do something with it, I feel like I'm wasting the idea. If I don't share it with somebody else that could. But there's several writer friends of mine in my writing critique group. If I have an idea and I don't think I could do it, but I know someone else could, I'm telling them, here, listen, take it, run with it. And they're the same way. If they've got an idea they think I could do, they tell me about it. Robin Adams, who runs my writing critique group, and I think you know her. She's a wonderful lady. The other night we were talking, and she said she had read an article about these guys taking microchips somewhere over in Asia somewhere out of prison and implanting with people's necks. And they were trying to see if they could turn off aggressive prisoners' aggression. That's really crazy. So they could hack into that, take control, amp it up. And she's like, you should write something like that. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I wrote that down, and I've been mulling it for a while. And I'm actually going to reach out to a couple other people. I think I'm going to do it as an anthology and have everybody make their own character and go with their thought and have it just be all these different people from the same location but different stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, the why that keeps you going as a newspaper man.
Well, as a news, I just, it goes back to wanting to make certain everybody's informed of something and knowing our past so we can not forget it and also adapt from it. If you don't know the mistakes of the past, then they say you're doomed to repeat it. I mean, look at, we had World War I, then World War II, same kind of mistakes continued happening, and stuff like that will continue on if we don't kind of pay attention.
That's an excellent, Who? Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Hello. I grew up during the time, I grew up in Riverdale, but during I was in junior high, what do they call it now, middle school, when the Atlanta child murders were going on. And there was just this terror, not just in Atlanta, but this, surrounding all the suburbs and everything. And I remember it every year about this time, very specifically because I remember having a curfew on Halloween, and we were not allowed to trick or treat after dark. And so it was this bizarre, I remember being angry that we had to be home so early, but at the same time, I remember all of the parents just kind of freaking out, walking, a parent had to be with us, and I'm like, I'm 12 years old, I can do this, but I think about it, and I think, my daughter she doesn't know what that was. She didn't learn about it in history class in school. She didn't learn about it in Georgia history. It was a big thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like this little girl, Debbie, that you were talking about. Her mother lives with that. And we, even peripherally, live with that. And just to have somebody say, you know, this is what happened. This really happened in our world. It sucks, but we need to remember. We need to remember that this, you know, can happen, and we need to take precautions. And without, I mean, that child deserves her memory restored until they can figure out what happened to her. And I think that, you know, in any of those horrible situations like that, having it brought back to light after several years is a great way to you're not just recycling history, you're putting a whole new light on something that happened to a whole new generation that didn't know. And so I had a question, but I've lost it now. But I just wanted to say that I think it's what you do is vital, because that, you know, remembering the past is very crucial to who we are today and who we will become and who we will influence. I mean, my daughter now has to learn through me, through my, you know, kind of, you know, bits and pieces memory about what that event was and why it impacted me.
Well, there's this famous saying that says if we forget history, we're going to repeat the same mistakes we did.
Right.
And I'm going to give kudos to Damon with his history background, because Damon was one of my beta readers for my recent historical novel, which dates back to 1861, 1862 era on the Georgia coast. And Damon was spot on. I could tell the historian reading the story, and he was very helpful with that aspect of it. But the recording of history and putting that exclamation point. Your article reminds me that earlier this year, one of the first author events we had Clay Bryant Sr., okay, who did the murder of Woodland Moore. And that was a famous unsolved murder case that was in Hogansville. Clay Bryant Sr., did anybody know who Clay Bryant Sr. was at Hogansville? Okay. So when this happened in the 70s, he was a teenager, and his daddy was the Hogansville chief of police. And he remembers being taken out to the crime scene of the well in this backyard where they pulled the body of this Woodland Moore out of the well. And they knew who probably was the murderer involved in this, but they could never pin it on him. And then years later, Clay Bryant Sr. becomes the chief of police in Hogansville. And then he goes into retirement, and in doing so, he becomes an investigator that on unsolved cases, and he ends up solving the case that ends up saying, definitely reveals who the murderer was of Woodland Moore, who was her husband. And he wrote the book. Now, going to the point that you're making, when we had the opportunity to go from an article that's in an archive someplace to a book that's on a bookshelf about history, it's preserving history. It's explaining and discussing history. That's important. I'm a historian, and I think that we need to do more historical feedback. I know there's a couple of authors that are sitting in this room that do historical novels. Now, we have fun with them sometimes, but it's important that we report the historical times accurately. So I digressed and got off on the wild goose chase, but that's fine. But Damon is great that way. So Scott, I'm going to come back to you and see if I can remember what my original question was, but balancing out your columns in your books, okay? Talk to me a little bit about, the whys of both of those and how that has benefited you.
I've read one novel, I guess it's a fiction book, and it's the hardest thing I ever did. It's only 160 pages, I think, but I've said this before, Mike knows that. Writing fiction is like telling a whole bunch of lies and keeping them all straight. It's the hardest thing in the world to do. It would help if you did an outline, but as I never did in high school or college, I never do outline. So fiction is hard, so I columns are a lot easier. I like to finish something. Books don't finish fast. What's the other question?
So why? What is your why answer to your column writing?
I guess I write a lot. I like to put a smile on my face, warm your heart, bring a tear to your eye. And once in a blue moon, like I told you, I ran about something. But I also like to toot people's horns. So can I talk about that book now? Just for a short?
Go for it.
Okay. The book I'm talking about is called Portraits of the South. And this is, like I said, I've been writing about people now for 6 years. And my first story was about a gentleman that I didn't know, and he didn't know me, but he told me about his grandson who was a runner and wanted to write, and he invited me to his house. A perfect stranger invited me to his house. So I went over and spent probably about 3 hours sitting with him in his driveway, just talking, and he's telling me all these really cool stories about how Kathy used to make hamburgers for him and his wife at the grill, and how he used to see the smoke trails of the planes coming for landing at the Atlanta airport, and how we drove to Miami before the interstate system, so it was a lot of dirt roads and stuff like that. And I was like, God, these are such cool stories. I said, I wonder if my grandson would listen to my stories like that. So the story, the column about that person was Perfect Stranger. That was the title of it. And I think he's here tonight. Am I right? And his name is Thomas.
He's right here.
He's right there. He's my perfect stranger. And Thomas doesn't know this, but I'm putting the stories I'm referring to. I think there's about 100 of them. I'm putting them together in a book. And the book is called Telling Stories. And the book is going to be dedicated to the Perfect Stranger.
Wow.
Could I just say something? Sure. I get emotional. Watch my life. Back in January, but as my daughter and I were getting ready to come over here, we got fixing to get in the car in the garage, and mama cat and had 4 kittens.
There's a story for y'all. We need 4 hums.
If anybody needs a kitten.
They're the cutest little orange kittens, so that's why we were late. Because we're huge cat lovers.
Before we leave, and I'll make sure you get it. I don't have a cat right now. I was praying about a cat, and Beth said, "Look, the Lord sent you 4." But anyway, when I think of Southern writers, I think of, they want to come along maybe once in a lifetime. Louis Grizzard, Bobby Hanson, also known as Ludlow Porch, Rick Bragg from Alabama. And those are writers I can really relate to. Y'all doing a good job. Just put something out there that we can relate to and is of interest. And I remember when Scott came to my house, and my grandson is a runner, so I thought they would really hit it off together, but it sounds like all them stories I told Scott, and they were true. He related to me more than he did a runner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
For that Perfect Stranger that said writing about people was really cool. So I get to toot a lot of horns for people that otherwise wouldn't toot them themselves. And some of them are in the room tonight, and they're portrayed in the book. One is Jim Christie, who happens to be a runner, just like Thomas's grandson and me. I've got Lori Whitney with her daughter here, her adopted daughter. Lori started the Hoping Forward Foundation, which what she does is works with adults with special needs, and she marries them up with volunteer opportunities in Coweta County. So she's working hard at that. And she's with us tonight. I've got Des Ross, who is the recreation director of the Monarch House for where Mike's mother lives, coincidentally. And Des lost her house in the tornado last March. So she's had a long haul of living, what did you say, couch surfing for a year before she's now living off Poplar Road, and she's got a house now. Her and her 6'1" 3/8" son, who's 15. He's giant. And did I miss anybody that's here tonight? I think that's all. But they're all in the book, and they all have really wonderful stories. So I just love telling these stories. And like I said, there's about 60 of them. One guy, I've got one, the only one that's not from the South is a gentleman that lives up in New York. And it's one of those stories that you see on Dateline. he got arrested for the rape and murder of a classmate. And the reason the cops were suspicious of him is because he felt so bad about her being raped and murdered that he went to where her where her body was, whatever, 3 different times because he felt bad. And they said, you know, the criminal returns to the scene of the crime or whatever. So they suspected him, and they ended up locking him up. And he spent 17 years in jail, and he got his law degree while he was in jail. He came out and has a law firm, and he's one of those. He works in one of those groups, his own group, that protects the innocent. His name is Jeff Deskowitz, and the reason he caught on to me is because I wrote a Sports Illustrated article that he wrote, and it talked about how the inmates really look forward to Sports Illustrated because they don't have anything else to look forward to. And I thought that was really cool. So I wrote a story mentioning that. And he had some kind of alert on the internet that says, if this name's mentioned, he knows. And he got in touch. So I got to tell this story. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, good.
Oh, no, you're going to ask me the last question. Why do you write?
Why are you
Go
right?
ahead.
Why are you right, Scott?
Because I like it, because I get to do what I just said. And I always say that if I get it in books, that when I'm gone, I'll be like I was never, that I never really left.
That's an excellent, excellent answer. I like that one. Yeah, I think that it is when we get older and we're getting closer to that reality that there's not only so many more birthdays coming up. You know, you start to think about legacy issues, you know, because I know that when I started writing, that was the reason I wrote novels, which was to leave a legacy to my grandkids. That in my poor attempt to write a good novel, you know, there's something in there that they would go, oh, I remember hearing my poppy talk about this, and it had these values. So, and I know Scott's books, first of all, if y'all really want to see somebody who's written a few books, go to Corner Arts Gallery and you'll have a shelf. It's called the Scott Ludwig Shelf. And I don't know how many books you've written in total, but we must have 15 of them there at Corner Arts Gallery. And people come in quite often and scour through. But, you know, you started on the running side of things, which was to try to be an uplift to runners and, you know, talk about your journey. And he wrote about 135 mile, what was that called? The one up the Pikes Peak and all that stuff.
Death Valley.
Death Valley. You know, I mean, why you would want to write about that and relive that, I don't know, but that's okay. He's run more miles than I have on my car. And that's amazing. But no, Scott is, I can see the transformation because, you know, his recent books are more about life and it's more about connecting with people and honoring people and leaving that legacy beyond just being a runner. Because your reputation as a runner, you know, is extremely, you know, well received.
Also, our host tonight, Hank, is in the book as well, but I'm one of 8,000 people that have written about Hank. But Hank Arnold, who's right there behind the desk.
Yeah. Hank, you know, Hank and his wife and what they do here, you know, deserves all the attention we certainly can do. So, as writers, Damon, you can go back to Marietta and write about the Coweta Force experience. You know, because we don't want to have any. You know, we want to have less rooms having to be honored to people that didn't make it. You know, and I say that with all sincerity for Scott and Chris, Cindy and all. But it takes more Hanks who understands all of that, and that's important. So I do honor that. What I want to finish this, because it's going to get late here in a second, you know, it's getting late, is each of you, you know, I know, Damon, you brought some books, did you not?
Yes.
Okay, and I know you brought some books. You brought some books too. All right, Toby, all right. Now, you want to get Toby's, because, you know, it's worth it.
Oh, thanks a lot.
You keep writing. Toby, you have to value. It's like the diamond, you know. Y'all are just rubies and quartzes over here. All right, so anyway, talk briefly about what books you have brought and you know where they're also found besides here tonight.
Okay. I brought two. These came out last month, actually. Portraits of the South, which is the 65 maybe profiles of people, 5 in the room here. And the other one is my third set of 101 columns, Southern Hospitality. And I'm really proud of the picture. when we lost Josh, we had a run on his birthday. What would have been his 35th birthday. So some of us ran 35 miles, some of us just ran bits and pieces. But as we were running on the last lap, we found this bay of hail and it says, "Hey y'all," on it. And I thought, well, what a cool picture for Southern hospitality folks. So that's the picture. It was on Josh's 35th birthday. And incidentally, his 37th birthday would have been tomorrow, actually. So anyway, the portraits is 15. This one's 20. And I have portraits for all of my subjects, complimentary at the end. So I'm the world's worst salesman. So if you don't buy any, that's fine, because I'm not a salesman. I just like to write.
Well, a lot in common there.
So talk about your books that you have here tonight.
So, I got two, and one is called Columns I Wrote, and that's columns, a collection of columns. And the other one is called A Book I Wrote, which is the one that's not all columns. I'm not a salesman or a good, title person. But, the cover for, Columns I Wrote, I got a buddy of mine owns a tattoo shop, and he had read all of my stuff that was in there. They just draw something, me, you know. And the only thing I wanted him to do was have some kind of ode to Louis Lazard. So, and if you don't want to buy it, you just want to see it, that's fine too. But so it's a drawing of me reading a newspaper, and the headline is "He's No Louis." I was like, that's like the greatest thing. Yeah. So that's the cover. The cover of the one is just I had handwritten that book like in a spiral notebook, and I just took a picture of my handwriting. That's the cover. Yeah, I just like writing too.
So you got them, they'll be
Yeah,
here.
they're over in that bag.
There you go. And then Damon.
I have two books. My first book is Dark Places. It's a collection of short stories, mostly kind of horror, science fiction, western, crime, fantasies. And when I say horror, it's not like the Saw movies or anything like that. I can't stand those splatterpunk stuff. It's mostly, when I say horror, I write like ghost stories or something kind of like the old classic monsters. You know, something coming out of the swamp and you don't know what it is. My second book is Other Worlds, and it's more science fiction heavy, but it's also a collection of short stories with some horror, fantasy, crime, and westerns in there. My first book has 40 pieces in it. The second book's got 30 pieces in it, and they're $10 each.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Anybody have any questions or comments to the three authors tonight?
I did have, I actually thought a little bit about the question. I was
You
trying
remembered
to
the question now? Okay.
Yeah. I'm really just right now just journaling. And every time I talk to somebody about my life, they say, "Oh, you ought to write a book." And I'm like, "Well, you should live through it first and then decide if you should write a book or not." But I want to start very small. And I don't even know if an article or a column is something that I've got in me. It might just be a blog. It might be just, I don't even know. A friend of mine actually writes long dissertations on her Facebook page about events in her kids' life. She started doing this when she started adopting kids years ago, and they're almost all adults now. And she has collected all of her Facebook posts, basically. And I'm like, that's a book right there. You know, I mean, she's a wonderful writer. I don't even know if I've got that much in me, because I kind of have to go around, come back, try to make it make sense. I read it and lose track of what I was trying to say. I mean, what would you suggest as far as what's the difference between what you do and just say having a blog?
Go ahead.
So a lot of times when I write a column, I'll tell the story, like on this golf thing that I played last week that I wrote about. I've had the story in my head and I literally typed it out, and that's it. And I think after so many years, it's weird because I can fall within about 50 words of 500. Just, you know, I've just learned how to tell a story in 500 words or whatever. but it's literally like just me telling the story out loud, but just typing it and just send it. So what we say on the range when we're shooting, you know, put it in the aim on it and just send it. And you'd be surprised. I'm still surprised at people can relate to it. You may not think that, but you gotta send it. You know, like just put it out there. Just tell the story. Like just write it how it is in your head and send
Well,
it down
that's what I
range.
was telling Mike, when I ran into him a few weeks ago was, there's something in me, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I gotta get it out. Because, you know, my brain's full, and that's basically where I am right now.
What would you say, Dan? What advice would you
I would say, even if you don't publish it, put it down on paper, because you can always leave it to your family, and that would be an heirloom, like the story that Scott had of the woman, World War II. She left that to her children. That would be something, and that's a way for them to get to know you better. So, you know, even if you weren't trying to, you know, professionally put it up, go ahead and put it down, save it for the family.
Scott, you?
I'm working with a guy in my church, he wants to write a book of his life when he was between the ages, I think 10 to 12, which would be like 60, 61, and 62. And he wants it for his grandchildren, mainly. But I've been working with him, and it's a really good story. Every chapter is really short, maybe a page, and it'll probably be about 2 pages of this. But everyone has a title like The Wreck, The Train, The Strawberry, and the title of the book is going to be The Boy. It's just classic and awesome. So yeah, so if it's just for your family, so what?
Remember that books, if you think in the terms of, hey, one day I'd like to have, you know, put in the book. Books start off in chapters. For me, rephrase that, scenes that become chapters. Chapters become sections of the book. And you slowly piece together this montage that becomes a workable story. So, you know, start small. If you start thinking the big thing, it's like standing at the bottom of the mountain, Pikes Peak, and go, how am I going to run up that thing? Whatever. Up, down, around. As a runner, I mean, if you're thinking of the finish line and you know, on an ultra marathon, you're already toast. You know, you take it one step at a time, you know. And I can suggest again, and I say this to everybody here, this is a quick commercial for hometown novel writers. You know, get with a group of writers that are just like you, that have no idea what they really can accomplish. They just know that they want to accomplish something. The why is bubbling up inside of them. There's a story that's inside of them that, it's funny, once you start that writing process, it gets easier. It's like anything. You know, you got to get through that first hurdle and realize that, hey, I can do this. And there's a lot of help that'll make sure that it's done well. A lot of people think that they're going to, you know, they get stopped because they're not the next Pulitzer Prize winning author. But they've got a story in them that somebody's going to benefit from reading. And by listening to all 3 of them, that's the reasons that they write, is they're touching people's lives. And that's what matters. So that would be great advice. For hometown novel writers, that's why we have, you know, expanded to the writer side of the thing and not just authors. And we offer the writers opportunities. So come out Monday night, Corn Arts Gallery at 6:30. Come on in, see if you feel comfortable with what we're doing, and you'll meet writers that are just like you, struggling. I've got a housewife, a sweet girl. She showed a short story before COVID, and we said, gosh, that's fantastic. It can be a book. She says, yes, that's great. Post-COVID, she comes back to the group, and we finally start meeting again. How you doing on your novel? Well, I know I just haven't found enough time yet to really do it yet. I don't know how. So she needs to be around people to help her to be encouraged to write. So I do say that. Something that you said back there about Southern Voices. I'm writing a series now. I'm posting. It's actually regurgitating something I had done a few years ago, but about historical Southern voices. And I've talked about Erskine Caldwell, you know, Margaret Mitchell. Of Cora Harris. I recently did Caroline Miller. Matter of fact, I'm reading her novel, The Lamb in His Bosom, which is a Pulitzer Prize winner in 1934. She broke the ice for Margaret Mitchell. And when you read how they used to write in 1930s, it will blow you away. And I don't know how to do that. The descriptiveness inside their novels is phenomenal.
Don't leave out Thomas Wolfe.
Don't leave out Tom. I could go on. William Faulkner, Thomas Wolfe. There's a whole kabang of them. And I've got a series of authors that I try to post on. But that goes back to, you do start with blog posts, then go to articles that you can end up sharing to the newspaper or magazine, and then those eventually become books. So I do encourage you. Everybody had, if you didn't get one tonight before you leave. This is the bookmarks for the Hometown Novel Writers Association, which is brand new. We got formalized as a nonprofit back in August, just in time for the Sharpsburg Book Fair. Please take that, the QR code, which I'm really impressed that I was actually smart enough to figure out how to do this. This will take you straight to hometownnovel.com, which it got our newsletter on there. People always say, why aren't I getting my emails? I go, why aren't you going to the webpage where everything is already there? You don't have to wait for the emails. So go there and get this. If you're interested in helping what we do at Hometown Novel Writers Association, we're starting our 5th year in 2023. This is a patron sheet here. You don't have to be a prolific writer. You don't have to be published yet, but you can become a patron of what we're doing. And for as little as $25 a year, we'd love to have you. And if you're really enthusiastic and you want to cough up $100, you're a lifetime patron. You don't have to ever do it again. And we'd be so ever grateful. And I know, Scott's our board vice president. Sherry Marchesella from Peachtree City is our other vice president. Damon has been involved in the office for a long time. Toby does it from a distance. Danielle Thorne here in the middle of all of us, she's just very quiet. She's been a super addition to what we do, and we really appreciate that. So thank you for being here tonight. Any last comments before we say go buy a book? You want me to say
I don't need to say that.
Go buy a book.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for being here tonight.